First, I'm going to pass to my colleague Aisha from Inspire Green, who's going to talk about some of the ways to use the technology that's supporting this meeting. So Aisha, take it away.
Thanks, Will. Welcome to our virtual public meeting. To begin, we'll review some basic controls to help you participate on this platform. We're all learning how to conduct virtual meetings 400 plus days in this format, so please be patient with us. Stay tuned after the meeting to add any additional comments via the Title VI form online or via the project manager, William Hansfield, at will.hansfield@dc.gov. Please note that this is an open meeting, and as required by DC Code 2-578, this meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be available to the public via YouTube and Facebook. This presentation slides and other meeting materials will be shared on the project team's website after the meeting has ended. If you do not wish to have your voice recorded, please do not speak. You may enter any questions or comments in the Q&A, which we will review in the next few slides. And here's some guidance about audio and muting. Everyone is on mute. You can't unmute yourself, but we can unmute you during the Q&A and comment period. To request to speak, you will need to raise your hand using *3 if you're dialing in over the phone to raise or lower your hand. And if you're joining us online, you can select the 3-dot icon at the bottom of your screen and then select raise hand. Also, just as a note that your video camera is off by default, just to preserve bandwidth for all the panelists here. And here is a preview of what all those screens will look like. If you're joining us via your web browser, that 3-dot icon is that black icon at the bottom selected. If you're joining via the WebEx application, it'll be at the side panel of your screen and the panelist pane. Again, you can dial *3 to raise or lower your hand if you're joining over the phone. And just to give a visual of what the Q&A function will look over the browser, this is where you can type in questions to the panelists throughout the meeting and after the presentation concludes. If you go to the bottom of your screen, click the question mark icon, you'll be able to pull up the Q&A panel and type questions for all the panelists. And if you're in the application, go to the 3-dot icon at the bottom right side of your screen to bring up that panel to type in your question. And if you're joining us over the internet, you can see an ASL interpreter on the side of your screen on the right-hand side. If you'd like to adjust the size of that video, you can click and hold your cursor to slide the size of the video to be larger or to be smaller. You can also close any open panels that are on the right side of your screen. So the participant panel, the chat panel, or the Q&A panel, just to maximize space. And lastly, a review of all the controls available to you throughout this meeting. You have, starting from left to right, you have the audio button, looks like a phone, the participant button, the chat button, then the Q&A question mark button, the 3 dots for raise hand, and the X mark for leave the meeting. Via the application, the controls look quite similar, except a lot of them are smushed at that 3-dot icon in the middle. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Aisha. It is now my pleasure to introduce my colleague from the National Park Service, Eliza Boyd, a senior park planner, Eliza, why don't you start us off and tell us about the Park Service's role in this great project?
Yeah, thank you, Will. As Will said, I'm Eliza Voigt. I'm the Senior Park Planner at the National Mall and the National Mall Memorial Parks with the National Park Service. The National Mall and Memorial Parks is excited to continue to work with DDOT and all of our stakeholders to move the 15th Street Safety Enhancements and Cycle Track Project forward. This is an implementation of what we call our National Mall Plan and our Paved Trail Plans, both of which envision increased multimodal access on the National Mall, connections to and around the city, and to other nearby national parks, of which you all very lucky in Washington, D.C. We have many of them. The plans emphasize the separation of conflicting uses, such as pedestrians, bikes, and scooters on our very busy sidewalks and multi-use trails. And this is what's going to be accomplished with this project. And with many similar other projects that we're working with in DDOT that will be coming up soon. So I just like to say thanks for coming, and we look forward to the presentation. I'll give it back to Will and to DDOT.
Great, thank you. And I believe we may have had a last minute change. Is Ellen Jones on the line? I think we were not able to get that together. So I'm going to introduce my boss, the manager of the Active Transportation Branch at DDOT, George Brannion. Thanks, George.
Sure. Thank you, Will. Yeah, it's great to be here for meeting number 2. This is an exciting project from DDOT's perspective. This is one of the key projects of our 20 by 22 program, which is a very ambitious goal to add 20 miles of protected bike lanes by the end of 2022. We are working our way halfway through that goal, and are if you've been around the district recently, you've seen many new projects. Will has been instrumental in building several of them, but we've got a lot of protected bike lane projects, and this fits in as a very, very key link in that a larger plan, because it creates a continuous protected bike lane all the way down 15th Street from the well-used and well-loved 15th Street cycle track, which goes up to Euclid Street in the northwest. This will create a connection to the tidal basin and Haynes Point and the mall. It's really a project that has a lot of co-benefits for National Park Service as well as DDOT by creating a better park visitor experience for those who want to travel around the monuments by bike or scooter. As part of it, we're able to address a lot of intersection safety problems for pedestrians and bikes and drivers at Constitution, Independence, by removing a lot of the turn conflicts that have plagued those intersections and made them problematic. It is an excellent project that we're very, very happy to be partnering with NPS on, and look forward to moving this forward as soon as possible. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to the project team, which is led by Drew Van Hengel of Nelson Nygaard. Why don't you take it away? Thank you.
Thank you. We're very excited today to discuss the progress of the design since our last public meeting. The agenda is covered on the right-hand side. We are going to be reintroducing the project, talking about the concept design and how DDOT anticipates measuring success for this project, the project timeline, and then wrap up with questions, discussions, and next steps. If you'd like more information, please remember to visit the website with the address that somebody should copy into the chat, please. So let's get going. What are we doing? And why is it important? The 15th Street Protected Bike Lane Project extends from Pennsylvania Avenue to Main Avenue and connects with other assets already planned and on street. The proposed project on the next slide will close an existing bikeway gap from 15th Street and the Pennsylvania Avenue cycle tracks north of the National Mall to the Mount Vernon Trail 14th Street Bridge, which is one of only 2 bridges that connects Virginia to DC's Central Business District. The 15th Street corridor is a logical connection and alignment because it provides the lower traffic alternatives for bicycle access and direct access to the bridge. 14th Street, on the other hand, nearby is a principal arterial and truck route, which can accommodate additional traffic and additional vehicle traffic. Sorry, I'm distracted by my dog who wants to chew my arm. Can we go to the next slide, please? As Eliza mentioned, this project has been proposed in 2 previously approved plans, the National Mall Plan, which identified the need for a separated bike route or lane along 15th Street, and the National Park Service paved trail study, which identified 15th Street between Pennsylvania Avenue and Main Avenue Southwest as a high-volume, non-motorized travel corridor. It proposed an extension of the cycle track as a short-term improvement within a 0 to 2 year time frame, accomplished by using a variety of strategies to repurpose travel and loading or parking lanes. The work to complete the design for this project is divided into several phases. First, examining the existing conditions for all road users and comparing them to projected future conditions with the project in place. Second, drawing up 100% design plans for an interim cycle track and pedestrian improvements that can be constructed this year. Third, to draw up some sketch concepts to refine and improve the interim conditions, the interim installation for DDOT's work plan and in the next 3 to 5 years. This interim installation this summer provides the opportunity to get the project on the ground more quickly and also inform the final design refinements with the on-the-ground experiences and information that make the final design and construction more cost-effective. During the course of the project, the design and future maintenance plans have also been informed by our first public meeting and ongoing meetings with the National Park Service, DDOT, and other area stakeholders. So where are we in this process? On the next slide, please. This project started in October, initiating the efforts described on the previous slide. Following approval of the conceptual plan, which was informed by the public meeting in February, the project team commenced the production of a construction document for implementation of this interim solution. Paving crews are on deck to install this plan once approved in late summer with interim materials, including some concrete work that will considerably improve safety and continuity at the bus Lay-Bys. We want to review tonight some of the design refinements we've considered based on the first public meeting and describe the key elements of the design to date. After the interim installation, the team will also develop a conceptual plan for potential modified long-term installations, which will require additional civil engineering work such as curb removal, grading, or side path modifications. In this next part of the presentation, I want to describe why this project is being advanced as a way to more equitably support all people moving along and across 15th Street. The project has 3 goals that relate to overall city and National Park Service policies: safety, ease of use, and balancing delay and access. The 15th Street corridor contains several unsafe intersections where permissive vehicle turning movements, such as permissive vehicle turning movements against people walking along the street. Also, motor vehicle and pedestrians interacting at uncontrolled slip lanes that put people turning off the corridor and people crossing along the street at the same time in conflict with each other. Thank you, Ian. More than 200 crashes have occurred within. Can I back up a second? Something happened there. There are 3 parts. There are 3 things that need to be accomplished by this project: safety, ease of use for all roadway users, and a balance of access and delay. On the next slide, we want to talk about safety. More than 200 crashes occurred within the project area between 2015 and 2020. 10 of those involved people walking and 14 involved people bicycling. Importantly, DDOT and National Park Service policies focus on people and acknowledge that people get around in different ways and that there are design and operational characteristics on the current corridor today that present safety risks that can be lessened through the project. Motor vehicles and pedestrians. Concurrent movements of vehicles who are permitted to turn in the same phase as people crossing the street on foot pose safety risks that can be eliminated by adding additional signal phases or prohibiting movements. At uncontrolled slip lanes, motor vehicles and pedestrians are in conflict with each other as people turn off the corridor and people crossing along the street at the same time have movements that happen at the same time. Pedestrian and bicycle and micromobility conflicts are occurring on the National Park Service trail. It's busy, and this project can reduce that by moving bicycle through traffic off of the sidewalk and onto the street. And finally, big bus circulator and bicycle conflicts. The current interactions among the big bus circulator and bikes on the street involve a crossover at the bus Lay-Bys, which is a complex movement for operators of big vehicles. Recognizing this, the design includes a long-term solution to eliminate crossover while still maintaining access to Lay-Bys. And that could be dedicated to people walking so as to make her visits there more relaxing and without conflict of micromobility and bicyclists. Biker Bia, who sometimes takes the bike instead of Metro, but feels uncomfortable riding between the White House and the 14th Street Bridge today. To driver Dana, who feels like people on bikes pop out of nowhere and make her drive chaotic. To tourist Tom, who wants to be able to focus on historic sites along the mall as he pops on and off the circulator. Finally, this project balances access, capacity, and delay. Making some basic assumptions with today's lane assignment, there's capacity for about 22,400 people per hour to use the street and its accompanying sidewalks because the cross-section of the street is heavily assigned to motor vehicles. With a rebalancing of the right-of-way, the street can serve 26% more people, or 28,300 per hour. In other words, the heavy demand for access to the national park's assets can be served by using the same amount of space to move more people. Vehicle level of service decline is anticipated, and DDOT and National Park Service are choosing to do this anyway because providing safe and connected bikeways and walkways that support the trips that happen along the mall require a change in the way through and parking lanes are assigned. 15th Street is a large right-of-way that already has truck and bus restrictions, with the exception of Metro buses and one tour bus. Nearby 14th Street, on the other hand, is designated as a truck and bus through route, which should be prioritized for both larger passenger vehicles and larger vehicles in general, as it provides direct highway access to the I-395. Under a business as usual, before the pandemic scenario, 14th Street should be able to process the likely diversion of vehicles due to the lane reconfiguration. But that said, there's a clear consensus developing that a significant portion of office workers will continue full-time or part-time work from home status. So our projection of delay is conservative and reflects a probable worst case. The range of passenger car delay along intersections today ranges from 2 seconds to 56 seconds. And the future average delay is expected to range from 4 seconds to 103 seconds under the proposed designs, which we'll talk about more later. This is the right project at the right time due to the safety benefits of the project, the increased capacity for people, the expected and acceptable anticipated vehicle delay at signals, identified alternative locations for vending and tour bus loading, and the ability to access all eliminated turning movements on alternative routes. So now I'm going to turn it over to Adriana to talk about the concept design.
Thanks, Drew. If you flip to the next slide, we're going to start from the beginning. What does the cycle track look like? So here's 3 examples. One's from Seattle, one's from Chicago, and then one's from literally right up the street on 15th in Washington, D.C. So a cycle track is fundamentally a 2-way bicycle facility. So bikes going both directions on the street, right next to one another, and then directly adjacent to the curb. So that's the travel piece. Next to it, there's usually a buffer. So there's either striping, as you can see in the Chicago example. Seattle has some planters. Washington, D.C., there's a combination of striping and pylons, but there's something there to protect that 2-way traffic from vehicles and other uses on the roadway. It clearly delineates what's going on in the space, and it makes sure that everybody's safe and that the penalty for someone making a mistake doesn't necessarily result in property damage or injury. So if we go to the next slide, we can kind of take a look at what we've been discussing since the last time we came to you in the public meeting. One of the biggest things that we talked about was vertical protection. So we're trying to make sure that we're addressing concerns about what deviations from the roadway could result in, as well as maintaining the view shed to the important National Mall and all of its assets. So we're balancing those two things. And what we've arrived at is the solution that you see here, and you can also see on the 4th Street Southwest through the National Mall today. It's concrete wheel stops with reflective strips, so they light up at night when your lights are on them. They're preferred for durability, and they have that limited impact on the view shed since they're low. We're not going to use flexible posts, so those taller vertical elements along the mall, except for at intersections, which I'll cover on the next slide. So the vertical protection, again, you can see it on the 4th Street Southwest through the National Mall. We're probably going to use a vertical element at intersections in particular in order to provide visibility for people turning onto or off of the corridor, that there is a different use. The cycle track is here. Make sure to guide your turn around that and then connect in with those lower visual impact yet still protective elements in the form of the curve. So we're going to seek to minimize the number of those flexible posts, but we're going to make sure that they're prominent and that they're in the right place. And the next slide will tell you what the right place is. So here's a couple more examples from DC and a couple of considerations that we have underway. We have centerline flexible posts at intersections. That makes sure, because the cycle track is about 12 feet wide, which is about as wide as a travel lane. So that blocks off and essentially halves that space, again, to make it protected from someone inadvertently driving up that space. The other option we have is a Case 71 bollard. You can see the sketch at the bottom of your screen, and it's a stainless steel bollard, so it's a bit beefier than those plastic flexible posts, and it is able to successfully divert traffic who would inadvertently make that move. So if you go to the next slide, you can kind of take a look. We took a gander at what this would look like along the corridor, and this is what we anticipate doing. So we're going to be taking a southbound lane on 15th, again directly adjacent to the National Mall, and turning that over to the cycle track. So that's the goal that we have in mind when we were putting together this plan. We go to the next slide. We know now what a cycle track is. We kind of have an idea of what the protection is going to be along with it, and we have that great visual about where it's going to be in space along the National Mall. But as we all know, as people who drive, as people who walk, as people who bike, it's free flowing and great when you're in those spaces between intersections. And it's at the intersections where we have some complex things and some trade-offs we need to discuss. So we're going to talk about 4 places: Pennsylvania Avenue, which is the northern terminus of our project; Constitution Avenue, where we have some major trade-offs between safety and traffic operations; the bus Lay-Bys, where we're working to resolve conflicts between all users; and then Main Avenue Southwest, where our southern terminus is, but we're connecting into another National Park Service project. So if we go to the next slide, we'll dive in. So this is Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest. Just to get you all oriented, the top of your screen is the National Mall. That driveway that's there is E Street, which is also the driveway into the White House. The south side of your screen is Pennsylvania Avenue, or the bottom of your screen, excuse me. So that is heading away from the National Mall, and north is to your right. So the cycle track that already exists today is at the top of your screen, and that's why it's the terminus of our project. We're connecting directly into that. So some important things to note here. We're still going to be permitting turns into the White House access road from that southbound lane. Our cycle track is going to be taking the curbside lane as well as the parking that's along the National Mall heading south to develop a 12 to 13 foot wide cycle track with a 3 foot wide buffer that will have that vertical protection in it. So we're repurposing the space particularly for that parking in order to make sure that we have enough room for 2 southbound lanes and the cycle track. So go to the next slide. So moving farther south along the corridor, Constitution Avenue is a place where we have to manage a lot of conflict, and crash history bears out that there are problems at this intersection. So one of the rules that we are trying to abide by when we're building one of these cycle tracks is to protect that cycle track and protect all of the users that are using it. What that means is that we're not allowing permissive movements across the cycle track. So a permissive movement from a driver's perspective, in this case, we have a northbound permissive left today. So you pull out into traffic on a green ball and you wait for the brake in oncoming traffic to make your turn. And drivers, are looking for a gap potentially in vehicular traffic, but at this intersection where there's also a huge volume of pedestrians and bicyclists using that crosswalk to cross the National Mall, they could and they have missed seeing a person, and that results in a crash. So we are taking action with or without this project to eliminate those permissive movements, and there will only be protected movements. So a protected left and a protected right at this intersection, crossing the cycle track and crossing that crosswalk. So this will hopefully make it easier for drivers to make that movement. They no longer have to look for those gaps in traffic, and protect those more vulnerable users so that they can get across the street safely. So if you go to the next slide. So moving farther south, there are 3 bus lay-bys on the project. So the bus lay-bys work today by allowing buses to pull into the space that's closest to the National Mall in this drawing, where you see the cycle track now in this picture, essentially. Our idea is to push the cycle track into that space and run it behind where the buses will be docking today. This basically removes a potential conflict between buses pulling into or out of the lay-by and cyclists proceeding north or south. In order to do this, we're going to have to do some demolition and widening of the existing median strip in that location. Presently, it just serves to protect the bus and to keep that separate from through traffic. We're going to widen it and actually make it a place where people can board and alight from their bus, be in a safe place where there's no other conflicts, there's no cyclists, there's nothing there but them stopping, pausing, figuring out where they're going to go next, and then going down to street level, crossing the cycle track, and crossing up into the National Mall. So if we go to the next slide, we'll take you to the southern terminus. So we talked a little bit about safety concerns about slip lanes, and Main Avenue has one of these slip lanes. We're going to be proposing in this project to close the slip lane that allows you to take a right turn onto Main. There are other ways to make this movement, and it was a very low volume of vehicles making this movement in the peak. So we're going to test this out. We're going to prohibit that right turn movement and run the cycle track directly down to the intersection. So hopefully this will help make things better for pedestrians crossing the street, again, as well as bicycles. This makes enough room for a 12-foot cycle track to get all the way to the intersection at Main. And I think if we go to the next slide, we'll see the other half of the intersection. So I said at the beginning of my talk here that we're going to be connecting into another NPS project. We'll go into the timing on that a little bit later. But that project basically takes this cycle track and runs it all the way to East Basin Drive. So we will be using some barriers farther upstream on the ramp to make sure that people, again, can't drive into the cycle track, but that cyclists are able to make a turn in front of the existing island there, and then pick up that cycle track, and they can take it as far as they want to East Basin Drive. So go to the next slide. The connotation for that, or the thing that we have to do with that, is we have to do a little bit of rework for the Cuts Bridge. We're still going to maintain turns into the tidal basin parking lot, but again, we're going to really focus on creating that safe space for bicycles, and we're going to accomplish that with some striping as well as some physical barricades so that people can't drive in it. So how do we measure success on this project? I've just shown you a bunch of pictures. We've just talked about what our goals are. And we said also that we were keeping in mind all uses when we were working on this project. So we have our walker, our cyclist, our driver, and our tourist. And we also have our goals, right? Safety, ease of use, and access and delay. We've been going through and taking a look at this from a holistic perspective with respect to all of these people. And we really see a lot of wins, in particular in the safety column, protecting those turning movements, providing vertical protection, making sure that we have enough space for our users to travel through this area. So safety, we're thumbs up all the way down as far as we can tell. In terms of ease of use, we're again trying to make sure that the space is legible, that it functions well. We're trying to get a good win for the bus lay-bys to reduce conflicts and confusion so that people know where they belong and where they need to be more cautious. So we're feeling pretty good about the ease of use and legibility. Where access and delay gets a little iffy, thumbs up, thumbs down, it's not thumbs up all the way down, is for our walker and for our driver. And that is because since we're repurposing both space in the form of the cycle track and time in the form of getting more time for certain movements out of existing signal lengths, people who are driving and potentially people who are crossing the street in certain locations will have to wait a little bit longer. And we're going to keep our eye on what that is. Again, not knowing how many people exactly are going to be coming back to work after we're out of this COVID situation. It's just something that is a trade-off with this project. But our cyclists are going to get a straighter shot down the corridor, and our tourists shouldn't be seeing any real delay in what they want to do going around the mall. So with that, these are kind of the outcomes that we could see. Our walker can enjoy her time with her friends, taking in the scenery of the mall. Our cyclist is hopefully going to feel a lot safer. It's going to have a much more direct way of getting down the mall. There are fewer hurdles for them to commute. Our driver doesn't have as many conflicts and as much chaos to look out for. So they might have to wait a little bit longer, but it's less of a guessing game when you're waiting for that gap because you have a signal phase coming up where you can just turn left and not have to worry. And our tourist, it still has a really clear, legible place where they can get off the Circulator, take a look around, maybe look at the cycle track, pick up bike share, and go for a spin around the National Mall. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it back over to Drew, who's going to now talk about when we can expect to see some of this stuff on the ground.
Thank you, Adriana. So the project and improvement installation are similar to the project design. It's being done in parts. The 2021 repaving schedules are helping to drive the construction this year, which will result in a continuous path of travel from the northern end to the southern end of the project. Some interim conditions will occur for this segment that is getting ready to be repaved in 2022. So I want to draw your attention to the right-hand side where the DDOT our plan is that as users, you can't tell the difference between the jurisdictions as you move down 15th Street, walking and biking and driving. But the reality is that these rights-of-ways are owned separately by DDOT and the National Park Service. So the first segment on the top, just north of Constitution Avenue, is going to be repaved by DDOT in 2021 during this summer. The NPS repaving schedule has the street being repaved in 2022 from the section from Constitution to Main Southwest, meeting up with repaving that's scheduled for this summer to make the connection to the south. But And so, although that is complex in terms of the paving schedule, on the next slide, we'll go through what that means in terms of what you'll see. This slide is specifically about the vertical separation, which you can anticipate this summer from the northern end to the southern end of the project. On the DDOT portion, north of Constitution, the project will be installed with its long-term solution, which includes the concrete barriers, which Adriana described, with flex posts, which can be seen on other projects such as the one on 4th. On the National Park Service portion south of Constitution, this will include interim applications using rubber wheel stops and flexible posts, plus some permanent conditions, including the bus lay-by constructions. Where needed, existing stripes that need to be moved will be ground and replaced so that all the road users can be accommodated. And this kind of patchwork of this, I don't want to call it a patchwork, but I already did. This schedule is driven by the 2022 scheduled repaving of that section of 15th Street Northwest between Constitution Avenue and Main. It gives us some time to get ready for the permanent installation as well. So again, concrete barriers with flexible posts, rubber wheel stops with flexible posts, and the bus lay-bys, and rubber wheel stops with flexible posts at the southern end. On the next slide, we'll show the long-term improvements. No change in the northern extent. Permanent curb buffers for the cycle track with no changes to the bus lay-bys, and the same conditions which you'll see by the end of the summer south in the connection to the southwest at Main. So in this next part of the presentation, we want to talk about what we've heard so far from the first public meeting, from stakeholder meetings throughout the last few months, how they've informed our design and where we're heading. So before we go into the open question and answer, we wanted to review some of the questions we heard at the first public meeting and respond to them so that we're all on the same page. And there are a few slides of these. So questions about other roadway users is our first topic. What will happen to the vendors on 15th Street Northwest? The DC government is working with the vendors as their permits for the 15th Street for 15th Street will expire to ensure will expire. This will ensure that they're aware of other vending locations citywide. Another question we heard are, where will tour buses be able to drop off and pick up passengers? No tour bus functions should currently be located along 15th Street or should be using the bus lay-bys located there, although we know they are convenient. The National Park Service and DC have specific locations where tour buses are permitted to park and load and unload, and those locations will be unchanged. There were some questions on the next slide around design. What about speeding drivers? What if they run into the cycle track barriers? The barriers selected will be able to withstand impacts and maintain protection between bicyclists and vehicles. Buffers between vehicle lane and cycle tracks will be 3 feet. This project will also result in traffic calming. By that I mean slower speeds, because there are lane width reductions that are being made in order to accommodate the cycle track and to slow drivers to avoid that possible condition. The middle column asks, can we get protected intersections at Independence and Constitution Avenues? The more permanent design that will be constructed in 2022, next year, during the repaving between Constitution and Main, could explore and will explore additional protections at these intersections. In the third column, will the cycle track be able to accommodate pedicabs? As Adriana described, we were able to find more space in the cycle track to accommodate a 10-foot minimum width behind the bus lay-bys. So that is our intent. On the next slide, we received some questions regarding connections. There's a lot of work, as we've all talked about throughout the course of this meeting, underway and planned to achieve DDOT and National Park Service goals around multimodal connectivity. So the question was, what is the status of the 15th Street cycle track near Lafayette Square? The National Park Service has been working with the White House to identify a solution to current closure and ensure future connections between the 15th Street cycle track north of H Street and this new segment. This project team, however, has not focused on this connection as it is north of Pennsylvania Avenue, which is the northernmost extent of our project. On the right-hand side, the question is, how will bicycles connect to the wharf and the multi-use path on Main Avenue Southwest? This is beyond the scope of the project as well, unfortunately, but the National Park Service and DDOT will continue to work to strengthen the connection along Main Avenue between Ohio Drive and the wharf's multi-use path. And at this point, I'd like to turn it back to the project manager, Will Hansfield.
Thank you, Drew, while my video catches up. And I know that we have some questions coming in through the Q&A. I was going to direct a couple of them to the project team so that they can be answered out loud. I've tried to answer the ones that have come through so far. But one that just came in is about flex posts, which I'll direct to Eliza Voigt. The question from Ed Carley is, why can't we have flex posts on the mall? And he talks about view shed a little bit, but Eliza, if you wanted to chime in about that a little bit.
So it's not that we can't, we're going to have them temporarily. We think a better condition is what is on 4th Street existing right now, where they have the condition that the design team showed with the rounded curb, and the flexi posts are at the intersections. So we think 4th Street has been successful. This is a cultural landscape, and everybody wants to enjoy the views as well as safely travel.
And I think just to call it out, we also have our final 2 meetings for this project are also public meetings held by the Commission of Fine Arts on May 20th and the National Capital Planning Commission on June 3rd. Part of their review does look at the view shed issues and aesthetics of the overall thing. And just as we were talking about earlier, there's a bunch of different repavings. We're trying to synchronize the different parts of the work with so we hopefully save money and don't waste materials, so that we synchronize up with the repavings. The one across the mall section is I think scheduled for 2023. So one of the ideas that we've been looking at is making that a much more permanent curb type facility. So as with the other ones, we have one up on, if you take a look at it on 15th Street between V and W. We have one that's separated by granite built-in curbs. There are no flex posts. This one's also parking protected, but I think that we do have some successful examples of very high quality cycle tracks that don't have vertical separation. 2nd Street Southwest is another one if you want to look at that one. So I know we can do it and make things pretty safe. I'm also very, very deferential to the concerns about views and everything else. And I think we're striking the right balance here. We had some questions about pedestrian conflicts and at the signals and how some of the signals are going to be done. So I'm going to sort of put a couple comments together or questions together. They were about where bike signals can be used and about the conflicts with vehicles at turns and just general pedestrian safety. Adriana, do you want to try to just say a few things about how you're thinking about and how you're designing the signal systems with those things in mind?
Yeah, definitely. So we're using a few things in order to make sure that pedestrians have a little bit more security when they're walking across the street. So as I touched on in the presentation, we're providing protected only turning movements across the cycle track. And so we're going to be holding vehicles making those turning movements that would be in conflict there. We're also providing where that isn't the case, so where the cycle track isn't the driver and where turning movements are also happening, what's called a leading pedestrian interval. So pedestrians get a couple of seconds to begin their crossing movement before vehicles see a green light. So that gives people a chance to be out beyond that conflict point or more in the view of a driver before they're going to be executing their turns. So the cycle track is a really powerful and important thing that is going to be kind of helping with that turn prohibition. But again, just from the safety stuff we're seeing out there, with or without that, there's some turns and there's some signal design that just needs tweaking.
Great, thank you, Adriana. There's just been some general questions about the one dynamic to talk about. We now have a standard to put a flex post in the center of any opening in our cycle tracks because of the potential for vehicles to use that as an opportunity to drive into them and access the curb. They're going in on 20th, so 20th I think has been getting a lot of use. It's not officially open yet. I know it's rideable. There's still some signal work, as I understand. And so there's still those final items to come. You'll see those come pretty soon. This has been designed with those in mind from the start. And hopefully that will solve some of that problem. So I want to just make the little adjustment that there will be a few flex posts on this mall section right at all those openings, again, to prevent vehicles from getting in there. It'll be a sort of minimal amount generally. But we are very aware of that. The reason we use a flex post, just this is interesting because I get to do this part too. In the winter, we clear these of snow. We salt them and we clear them of snow so that they can be used throughout the winter. I'm a year-round cyclist, and now that I drive the snow plows, we do actually need a way to drive over them. So that's partly why we don't use something like a metal or concrete bollard. It allows us to actually get into them without having to, take a lock and key out, that sort of thing. So that's part of why we use that product. We are always experimenting with ones that last a little longer, or easier to manage, have better resilience, things like that. But if you want to know about the design choice, that's part of what informs it, is so that these can be year-round facilities. And I think, I think we've covered most of the questions, and I'm trying to make sure that we've got everything. Well, if anyone has a final question they don't think has been answered, take the opportunity right now to pop it in there. A little bit about the timing that I can talk about while we see if any other things come in. We are trying to synchronize this work with a repaving project on the portion between Constitution and Pennsylvania. That's a DDOT responsibility for repaving. That looks like it's going to happen in July. So there will be a repaving first, and then we have the opportunity to put in essentially the permanent equipment for that section. Again, it will probably be some of those wide concrete blocks between the Pennsylvania intersection and the Constitution intersection. The next repaving is going to be in 2022 and 2023, and that's the mall section. So we're going to be using rubber blocks in the interim because they're just much easier to manage when we know we have to take them out at a later time. And so that's going to be the next section. And then just to say it one more time, there's another project that NPS is already implementing, and it's from Main Avenue to essentially the Jefferson Memorial, that's going to link up with this. So we're dealing with this section, the sort of portion that wasn't addressed when we started this in 2019. We now have essentially the whole way planned with somebody going to build it this year between Pennsylvania and 14th Street Bridge. So that entire contiguous path is going to have a cycle track. So you'll really be able to go from Euclid Street in Northwest and Columbia Heights all the way down here on a cycle track. We are aware of the issues with the White House, especially the closures. It's a very challenging area to work in. We don't get any advance notice of the closures either. So I'm sorry when those happen. We just put in a bus bike lane on both H and I Street, and we're going to be modifying that in the coming year. But we're also looking at continuing the cycle track up 15th Street so that we're not dependent on the section through Lafayette Square. I wish I had more to report on that, but we are aware of it. We're trying to come up with a plan that really satisfies that, that interest and need. There's a question just came in from James Harnett. Hi, James, about are we going to refresh the existing 15th Street? Through this project, no, we are going to, through this effort, build this. We are aware that some areas need refreshing. We did a few last year. There's going to be a few spot places where we're doing work. The whole thing, it's about a 3-mile corridor. Probably all needs some updating, both design and just sort of equipment and striping updates. And we're trying to get to those. If you know a section that's really missing markings or equipment, please let us know the specific blocks, and we try to get to them. We're in this place where we're both trying to really expand our network of bike facilities, protected bike facilities in particular, and upgrade the existing ones. So last year we did the upgrade of 4th Street Southwest and portion Northwest, where it was regular bike lanes, and now they're protected bike lanes. So that's a case of upgrading to a new, much more protected standard. So we're trying really hard to just be very productive and have a really big year in terms of building this stuff. And hopefully that we can get to that. But I'm, in my case, I much prefer working on brand new stuff to build out the overall network. And yes, we're also trying to multitask and upgrade the things that are out there. So thank you, James.
Will, I wonder if Molly can help us with the raised hands and the order that they went up in,
Okay.
because there are quite a few hands up right now.
Mm.
And I can't see them.
Okay, I believe Karthik was the first one who had raised a hand. I am unmuting you. Apologies if I mispronounced your name.
Yeah, I appreciate it. This is Karthik Balasubramanian. I'm a pedestrian. I feel like this is great that this is being done, but and I feel like this should have been done a long time ago. I'm particularly concerned about Haynes Point, though. That's where 2 people died, and it's a very easy fix. And I'm not sure why NPS isn't doing anything about it.
Go ahead, Eliza.
Yeah, well, thank you for your comment. Yes, that was just a terrible incident, and we are reviewing it right now, looking at a number of different options, and we take this very seriously, and you will most likely see some changes in the very near future.
Okay, I hopefully soon. I mean, there's like an easy trade-off between safety and there's not even any buildings on Haynes Point. So it's like just like take a lane. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, again, again, we're reviewing a variety of different options, getting input from our friends in the city and elsewhere, and you'll most likely see some changes very soon, and we take this very seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I note a comment from Jay Swiderski. It's about going before CFA. We actually just got noticed that we are going to be on the consent calendar, which typically means, they approve the project. They don't go through your presentation. So we have a presentation we prepared. It looks like we're not going to deliver it, but they aren't asking for changes is what that means. So no, at this point, we don't anticipate any changes coming out of that meeting. Similarly, with the NCPC meeting, I think I could say we don't anticipate any changes to the immediate work. They might have opinions on what happens in 2 years and the nature of the permanent cycle track. Probably much more like on the material side than the spatial dimensions. I think what you've seen in this presentation is probably the spatial dimensions you can expect for some time.
Okay, so the next hand I believe was Gordon. I'm unmuting you now.
Hi, thank you very much for this. I've been dealing with these types of issues since when the relationship with NPS and DDOT wasn't very good. And so thank you for working together on this project and hopefully many more. My question relates to the broader connections that, as you mentioned, are not part of this project. What is the best way for DC residents to get engaged in those processes, like connecting the Jefferson Memorial Cycle Track to the tennis center on Ohio Drive, or how can we get more involved in your planning?
And that's directed to NPS.
Yes, please.
Yes. Hi, Gordon. Well, the specific connection you're talking about right now, we're doing, right? Connecting the cycle track that we developed south of the Jefferson Memorial is going to connect to Haynes Point, I mean, it's going to via Ohio Drive that we will begin this summer. We have a lot of other projects that we're working on. For instance, the Rock Creek Parkway Trail project will be kicking off in June, another great project that we're rehabilitating, and tunneling through a DDOT bridge, another way that we're working hand in hand with DDOT. And how we have a lot of social media. Visit the National Mall website. Listen, we have road alerts when we're closing roads due to construction, some of these enhancements. So if you have any input, feel free to reach out to us and let us know your thoughts. But hopefully, again, we're implementing these plans that we've approved over the years now to provide more access for more people to the National Mall and to the other sites, working closely with our friends in the city. I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you. And then as it regards maintenance, I think Will said this, but am I understanding correctly that the snow clearing and those types of things, even in the NPS segment of this route, those will be cleared by the city?
Yes, right now that's the maintenance agreement that we're working on, but we already are driving these routes and we already have a fleet of snowplows. NPS funded this planning work and through a Federal Lands Access Program grant. And so as part of that partnership, we're going to continue plowing and salting. I think we need to just make sure that the other parts are addressed. So like, cleaning trash and things like that. I think that's probably, we're like negotiating this in real time, Eliza, but that's probably, you have staff there doing similar things anyway. So I think that we'd probably look to sort of split those responsibilities based on who's out doing similar work in the immediate vicinity. So that's how we're doing. We're just trying to make sure that it's a usable facility year round is really our goal, and making sure that we have an agreement to do that. I just want to give some time also to DCRA, who's been on the line, to speak to some of the issues that have come up related to the vending spaces. So go ahead, Vanessa, if you want to take the floor.
Great, thanks, Will. So this is Vanessa Carrero. I'm from DCRA. Wanted to just clarify, I know there was an answer in the chat about vending slots, and just to add more information, there are about 54 slots that remain in that area on 17th Constitution Independence, but we are very cognizant of the hardship that the elimination of the 18 SRV spots will entail for the vending community. So we, at this time, I know it was in the chat, we are not able to add other slots to the lottery, but we continue to have conversations with DDOT and NPS to see if there are spots that we could add that meet their requirements. So far, we have not been able to find those, but want the vending community to know that we're open to that and open to continuing those conversations if we could find spots that meet those requirements. We have not been able to do that as of yet, though. Also wanted to clarify, so the vendors who, the spots that are being eliminated as part of this project are SRV spots, stationary roadway vendor spots. There are other spots that are for MRVs, and at this point, the SRV vendors are not permitted to enter the MRV lottery. But we do think that there are some SRV vendors who might qualify to transition their license types and transition their permitting types. And so we will be sending out communications to the vending community with some tips and resources for how to potentially do that for those who may be eligible to make that change and enter a different lottery for a greater number of available spots.
Thank you, Vanessa. And Vanessa and her team are available for continued work on this topic. And I just wanted to call attention to the time. We're about a minute from our 6:30 conclusion. So thank you to everybody. I'll take the final word. Just in the span of my career in DC, I was lucky enough to work on the first iteration of the 15th Street cycle track in 2010, when we took it from a one-way southbound facility that went less than a mile, and we made it a 2-mile facility. And since then, another mile has been added to it. So So it's really been something that my career has been involved in for a long time, and so it's professionally and personally satisfying to work on this project. And I've been a user of this corridor for most of the time I've lived in Washington, D.C., and I'm really excited about being able to deliver this one. Again, bear with us as we install these things, and I know it's really exciting when the paint first goes down. Usually there's a bit of a period where there's some signal work going on, and things that are not easily visible still need to change. So be cautious as we first get it in, and know that we'll try to announce when there's everything's in place and everything's ready. But we're really hopeful that by early fall we'll be ready to let you guys ride in this one and scoot in this one, and it'll be a much safer corridor for everybody who's walking, riding the bus, and riding their bicycles down here. So looking forward to it. Thank you for joining us and spending your time hearing about this project tonight. Our project website is up, and you can find me at will.hansfield@dc.gov if you need any more information. With that, I want to thank everybody who participated. I want to especially thank the project team led by Drew. It's been really great working with everybody, and we're pretty close to getting everything ready to get this project in. With that, have a great Wednesday night, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your evening.